Hi, and welcome everybody here live from the GCCM in Miami. First time, first round, but also nice and crowdy actually. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome for you also out there, and welcome to the audience here for being here, coming along, and helping us to fill up the room, but also have maybe some extras or some value added questions for us and the panel here. So let's see how that goes. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about, and that is our topic, the new business models to meet cables and ISP futures connectivity and digital demand. Again, a mouthful. I cannot do it by myself, and you're probably out there happy that I'm not doing this by myself. So let me first give a quick round to the panelists to introduce themselves. And Andy, welcome to you as well. So Andy, while you're just connecting to the audio and you're still on mute, so you can always unmute yourself, please. I'll give you a quick word to introduce yourself and then for the rest of the guys. So Andy, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Then apologies for being late. I was having some technical difficulties getting on. I'm Andy Bax, Chief Operating Officer of Seaborn Networks. We operate a network in the Americas, north, south, and a few places in between. So I'm looking forward to what will hopefully be a good discussion today.
Okay, thank you so much and welcome having you, and thank you Seaborn for sponsoring this session. So over to you, Don. Welcome. Good morning to you from the beach.
Good morning. Thank you for having me. Don McNeil here. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at GTT. GTT is headquartered in McLean, Virginia. We have employees in about 28 countries around the world. We serve, right currently, we have service offerings in 140 different countries. Our big claim to fame is our Tier 1 IP backbone, where we enjoy our CATER rankings in the top 5 on a consistent basis over the last several years. And look forward to participating in the panel, and thanks again for having me.
And you're more than welcome being here, and thank you for joining, Don. So let's go over to Eduardo. Eduardo.
Yes, good morning, Eric and the audience. My name is Eduardo Falconi. I'm CEO at GlobeNet. We own and operate a subsea cable network between North America and South America, touching basically the US, Bermuda, Colombia, Venezuela, Brazil in certain points, and lately we extended our network into Argentina as well. We also own and operate a set of edge data centers. That's very recent, a couple of years ago. And we're honored to be here with you and joining this interesting session.
Thank you so much. And it's more than a privilege to have you, Eduardo, and thank you for being with us. So Andres. Infinera.
Thanks for having us. I think this hybrid mode is actually very interesting. My name is Andres Madero. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for Latin America at Infinera. Infinera is an optical equipment provider. We operate pretty much in every single country in the planet, and I'm happy to join.
Thank you so much, and good having you on this. And fortunately, you could join us here live at the GCCM in Miami. So thank you so much. So from one vendor, we go to the other one. So it's over to you, Ricardo.
Hi, thanks for having me as well. So I'm Ricardo Franco. I'm a senior consultant for Subsea sales, and I look after the Americas, supporting Subsea business in the Americas and also supporting our customers. So CNA is a solution provider, operator, not operator, so the provider, and sells software, network gear, and services to mostly every telecom operator in the world. And happy to be here with you all.
Thank you very much, and good having you, Ricardo. Super. So, ladies and gentlemen, here live and out there on the World Wide Web. As mentioned already, Andy, if I may invite you to start your keynote presentation. What are you gonna talk us through today?
So, as I said, I did have a couple of technical challenges getting here. So I'm actually using my phone. So if somebody I don't know if somebody there can bring up the slides.
Yes, and we will share presentation for you from here.
Thank you very much. That's very kind.
So Andy, just a quick tip, because otherwise we hear next, you know, the next slide or another slide.
But it's really, we've kept it simple. There's actually just 3 slides. So it's nice and simple.
Always very efficient. Thank you very much, Andy. So,
So what I thought I'd talk about today, so we're going to talk about, part of this whole discussion is around the blend of, and how you marry the needs of huge capacity requirements from, hyperscale and operators like the folks that we've got on the panel today, versus the scalability and flexibility to be able to support local markets, ISPs, local operators, folks that are, challenged in terms of services they want, but also in terms of the prices that they would like to pay and are able to pay. So in a market like the Americas, where price compression is has been significant over the last few years and will probably continue to do so for at least a little period, being able to marry those two objectives can be somewhat of a challenge, especially in the subsea world, where you've got, extremely long distances, large scale networks, and depending on the type of build you've got, a wide variety of end places to try and get to. So I thought it would be helpful to just kind of go over the approach we've taken in conjunction with our technology partner Infinera, the approach we've taken on CBRAS-1, and actually we've already taken it on AMX-1, but on CBRAS-1 on our cable between New York and Sao Paulo, the approach we've taken to enabling ourselves to deliver hyperscale demand, but also ISP-driven economics, and they are very, very disparate markets, very, very different in terms of requirements, but fundamentally drive core network and the ability to deliver huge amounts of capacity across a network infrastructure. So if you want to just flip to the next two slides.
Okay.
There we go. I thought we'd start with what does a traditional subsea network look like? And this is one that is, it's, well, for those that have been involved in our business, it's one that's kind of well known all over the world. You have subsea cable in the middle there, the blue line. You have a couple of domestic networks at either end with some POPs at either end. And then you have large subsea equipment that traditionally would, provide maybe anywhere between 1 and 3 terabits per pair of boxes on a fiber pair. And then you've got, smaller, more traditional domestic network equipment that provides normally larger scale, but still in the single digit terabits across fiber pairs on different networks. And to get from, I take this example here, to get from POP A on the left-hand side there to POP C on the right-hand side, delivering, 100 gig wavelengths or whatever it may be, you basically need 6 pieces of equipment in a traditional subsea network infrastructure. And this is largely true across, the vast majority of subsea networks in the world today. This is a traditional architecture for subsea plus domestic networks. It's very flexible because it means you can take the capacity that goes across the blue line in the middle, however many 100 gig waves that is, and you can deliver it to POP A on the left-hand side, you can deliver it to POP B on the left-hand side, and the same on the right-hand side. But it's as you can see, it involves a huge amount of equipment. All of this fairly significant, fairly expensive. So over time, that becomes inefficient in terms of delivering large amounts of capacity or scaling the network to be a high capacity network. It's very good for early stage. So in the early stages of CBRAS-1, in the first couple of years, this was a very good infrastructure for us. It enabled us to grow multiple locations at either end without expanding too much subsea capacity. It enabled us to move traffic around, groom traffic, start to identify where major hubs were within our network. But it's not sustainable. You can't sustain this from an economic or from a capacity perspective moving forward, because it gets really challenging in terms of not just the amount of equipment you have to keep buying, but also space, power, and spectral efficiency for both the domestic and the subsea networks. But if you were to walk into most subsea networks today, you'd see something resembling this or very similar to it. So if you want to go to the next slide, this is there we go. I can see it too now. This is an optimized delivery platform. So this is using optimized spectrum delivery from pop to pop rather than pop to station, station to station, station to pop. This is delivering entire spectrum across the network. And the big difference here is, on the previous slide, we were talking about N times 100 gigs for the equipment multiples. Here we're delivering the entire subsea fiber pair across all the pops at either end, with the ability to drop that at any of those pops on either end as well. So you maintain the flexibility. You're still able to deliver capacity from any pop on the left to any pop on the right. And by the way, including any pop, you could go from pop A to pop B if you wanted to. But basically, any pop on the left to any pop on the right. Rather than purchasing multiple sets and pairs of equipment every time you want to add, whether it's 1, 2, or a couple of terabits to the fiber system, you have to buy a whole new set of equipment. This is basically a one-time deployment per fiber pair. So those black X boxes that you see there are all spectrum gateways deployed once. They look after the entire fiber pair, whether it's subsea or domestic or terrestrial. And then what we've basically done is taken all that equipment that was in the previous slide, and we've moved it all out towards the edge. So this is what we within Seaborn call taking subsea to the edge. This is not edge as everybody talks about, but this is us taking subsea to the edge. So all that expensive equipment that was duplicated in the original architecture is now basically replaced with a one-time capital investment to enable the entire fiber pair to be distributed across the entire network. And then the only growth drivers now are, where is my capacity being delivered? If I'm delivering all my capacity in pop A, I'm putting DWDM equipment in pop A. If it's in pop B, I'm putting it in pop B. It's much more efficient. It's extremely flexible. It still delivers the same wave services, all the same services you delivered in the previous slide, but it's highly efficient for the entire capacity of the fiber pair. So as that grows over time, this same platform stays in place. And as such, it's extremely sustainable in terms of delivering high capacity for, the hyperscale multi-terabit customers, because, not all hyperscalers are building their own networks or utilizing entire fiber pairs today. There are a lot now moving down the road towards utilizing large amounts of spectrum on cable systems, especially in emerging markets. So this is extremely sustainable in terms of delivering services for them, whilst also dramatically reducing the cost of delivery for traditional telco capacity services. So the services we deliver to our customers, be they traditional operators, ISPs, medium to large enterprise customers, we reduce over a very short period of time, we have reduced our effective cost per 100 gig wave across the entire CBRS-1 network by something like 70% by deploying this architecture. So it's a massive benefit from an economic perspective, which obviously enables you to be much more aggressive in the marketplace, disruptive, competitive in terms of ongoing price reductions. It's sustainable in terms of you can grow the network much more efficiently and to be honest, much easier and faster, whilst also maintaining the flexibility that we've all come to almost take for granted in terms of the architectures we had before. So it's it's an interesting advance. It's one that we are extremely positive around in terms of the impact it's going to have, not only for our large customers, but importantly for our small customers too. The ability this gives us to be extremely competitive and aggressive and disruptive in the marketplace in terms of all the products that we provide by making this change at a much more core network level. is going to bring big benefits for us from both a cost and a delivery of service perspective. So we're very excited about this. If you move to the next slide, we just finished rolling this out across our entire CBRAS One platform. We've already got it, as I mentioned earlier, we've already got it on our AMX platform. So right now we have full spectrum gateways in Sao Paulo, Rio, New York, and Jacksonville. That enables us to deliver, whether it's 1 gig, 10 gig, 100 gig, or multiple terabits. It's all across the same platform now. It's all extremely sustainable. And you know, we're the first to deploy it across the network. I would imagine others will follow very shortly in terms of this type of architecture, because it is kind of leading the way in terms of enabling us to deliver the services we're going to spend a bit of time talking about today. So I just thought that might be a useful kind of preface to the discussions, because often we talk about how do you compete, what do you do, how do you remain, you know, relevant, and how do you sustain what you're doing, and these are the types of things we have to keep doing and keep innovating to be able to do that. So I thought it was a useful start to the conversation. That's it.
Thank you very much, Andy. And it's really, I mean, you know, with your not your last slide, but what we want before about you know, the spectrum delivery architecture platform. 70%, you said?
Yeah, 70% reduction.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yep.
Now, let me quickly check if somebody from the audience has maybe a question for Andy. Do we?
Hopefully my Infinera friend has no questions for me.
Oh, we know where that 70% comes from, Andy. Definitely.
Okay, so that's good. But let me. I mean, because it's all brilliant and news and fantastic and innovative and absolutely sustainable. And I do see a question from Gonzalo coming in. So regarding the second model, probably I think it's a spectrum delivery architecture model. If you want protection on the wavelength, especially in the terrestrial parts, you need to spend more money in the optical domain as you need to switch.
No, it's fully protected. Both of those green rings you saw on that slide there were fully protected.
Yeah,
it's fully protected spectrum delivery. Okay,
cool. So that answers me the question. Now, for me, a quick question, Andy, if you permit me, on the life cycle, where do we see the difference? I mean, you talked about sustainability, but where do you see, let's say, the cost effectiveness? Also, let's say on the previous, let's say the old model and the spectrum architecture or delivery platform models.
So that's a great question. So we are seeing. So obviously, you know, you got to spend capital to put those spectrum gateways in. We're actually seeing, but in terms of what you would have continued to spend deploying the previous architecture with the back-to-back devices and the different boxes. The DWDM layer, we saw a payback on those spectrum boxes in the first 12 months. Not with a huge, you know, this is not transatlantic we're talking about. We're not talking about dozens of terabits a year, but just within our existing model, what we would have spent deploying CapEx to put more equipment in to deliver subsea capacity and separate terrestrial capacity, by replacing that with this spectrum mode, basically a 12-month return on that equipment.
That's massive.
And from then on, like I said, a 70% reduction in delivery costs.
Okay, so what does it, from your point of view, mean to your end customers?
So depending who you talk to,
or are you keeping that margin in your pocket?
No, we see this as fun. So we've seen. You know, you go back, you look at the last 3 years, for example, somewhere between 15 and 25% a year price reduction. Now, you know, network equipment has not reduced that much on a unit basis over the last 3 years. So while price erosion has been quite steep in our region, the cost to deploy those networks has remained not flat, but it's come down, but not in line with price reduction. But we don't see that market price erosion going away anytime soon either. So this enables us to continue to drive down the per gig price for end users, drive down that price without giving up on quality and as I mentioned earlier, the good question was, we're not giving up on fully protected domestic network. So the ability to switch traffic around the entire network, we're not giving that up in terms of trying to get to a cheaper solution. This is a same quality of service, same level of service, just much more sustainable. And we, I'd encourage every operator to look at this type of architecture because it can be a game changer. It really can.
Talking about game changers and so maybe quickly for you, Andy, and then I'll ask the guys to join us. What are the current and future market demands and challenges, and which strategic opportunities do we see from your side? I mean, does it fit in what you just mentioned to us? I mean, what you talked about us with the Spectrum platform?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, we got two kind of diverging requirements right now. We've got content owners looking for not only delivery of high capacity services from a pop to pop perspective, but they want to use their own devices, and that's another benefit of this Spectrum approach is you deliver Spectrum to the endpoints, and then large capacity customers can use their own equipment. They can plug their own equipment in. We don't have to light it for them. They can use it themselves. So that's one challenge right now is how do you get from downtown Sao Paulo to downtown New York on an end-to-end basis, delivering for folks that want, 2, 3, 4 terabits today and 10, 12, 13 terabits in the next 2 years. Whilst also being able to recognize that, for example, in Brazil, regular IP pricing, wholesale IP pricing has gone from, $1.50 a meg 2 years ago to on average somewhere between 25 and 35 cents a meg now. And it will continue to come down. It's not at the bottom yet. It is a very, very competitive market, and delivering that not only wholesale, but also across the region is a challenge that bespokes and requires a different architecture and a different approach. And that's what this, that 70% reduction in cost of delivery, that is fundamental to maintaining that type of service level and being able to meet the pricing demands of customers that are, they're growing very, very quickly, and they're recognizing that in growing that quickly and on a route and in a region that is developing as fast as the Americas is, then they should be seeing prices similar to other regions, and that's what they're demanding. Okay. And they'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So let's get Don, Eduardo, Ricardo, and Andres to the discussion as well, and welcome again, gentlemen. So Don, for you quickly, just setting a little bit the landscape. Where do you see the current and future market demands?
So I mean, certainly, Andy was definitely moving in the right direction. As an ISP and serving global needs, we've seen tremendous overall traffic growth, and certainly more and more now, not just coming from the traditional content and I'll use the term legacy type internet traffic, but increasingly now with over the top services ranging from SD-WAN platforms and security platforms, the amount of traffic going to and from the cloud, either supporting the cloud or being served from the cloud. Yeah, that's a big driver. We've seen 20% year-over-year growth, and even after kind of the effects of COVID factored out, we still see growth just because of the increasing demand that the internet now as a transport mechanism is only getting wider and deeper with regard to the digital economy. One immediate trend, certainly Andy touched on it, price. That's always going to be front and center just because of the downward pressure and the commoditization, if you will, in some cases. So, we're constantly looking at ways to differentiate, whether it's in the security domain ourselves. deploying things like RPKI. So for those of you maybe not familiar with that, that's really starting to put some security around BGP, which the nature of the internet being very open, also creates some vulnerabilities, and more now, we think with the reliance on the internet, security is a front and center. And then just capacity growth. We see and project that in the next 18 to 24 months, the need for 400 gig connections at the peering point specifically will be very, very important and relevant. So increased capacity and more importantly, just the constant demand is definitely creating new opportunities for us.
Okay, Eduardo, you want to step in here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I agree, of course, with Andy and Don on the changes that the demand is creating for us, the challenges as well. You use Don, a term which is the legacy internet, which is appropriate at this moment because we see the demand not coming from the traditional internet access that used to be users accessing the internet worldwide. But now we see that the demand is coming from different types of applications like video streaming, social media, and lately gaming, which should posing quite a bit of challenges for us, for let's say the carriers, because the demand is not only on the capacity, it's very broad demand coming from network efficiency and also from the quality of experience that both on the user side and on the OTT side is key for the success. So carriers are squeezed in between the user and the content provider. And the key for success is going to be to find how to deliver what both of them are demanding in an efficient way.
Sorry, I had trouble with my mic. Thank you, Eduardo. So let's go to the other guys. I mean, Andres, maybe if we can start with you. Maybe you want to reflect on something that Andy mentioned before, and also maybe bridge it immediately to what strategic opportunities you see in the current with the current and the future demand, which is actually bombarding us.
Well, I think Andy mentioned something which is pretty interesting, and it kind of reflects back to the word of innovation and disruption. If you're not considering today buying an electric car, you're just not going to be competitive 10 years from now, right? It's just going to disappear. It's like buying a horse when you can buy a gas car. But today, I think that he mentioned something pretty interesting, which is a change of architecture, that optimizing the way they do their network, it opens not only the possibility to reduce their prices to the end customer, but it also opens a whole new a world of opportunities for the cable operators. We have now guys who used to do a lot of DWDM on the terrestrial side, considering getting themselves wet, and we have a lot of the wet guys considering that, you know what, how far is my edge cable who's going to go?
It's like my martini, right?
Exactly.
Wet or the dry one.
Wet or the dry one. Exactly. But we see a lot of that. And there's a lot of opportunity in Latin America. We see a lot of the terrestrial guys looking at the models of the subsea cable operators, because they understand what is to squish every single last dollar out of their investment. And I think from a technology perspective, those who are deploying the fifth coherent optical technology, such as here Ricardo and ourselves, we understand that pushing that boundary is extremely important. It's also enabling them to start thinking about not only selling capacity, but they sell a spectrum. And that's a big word, a big buzz right now in every single RFP is can you sell frequency instead of selling capacity? Because it enables the end customer to, hey, you know what, I may want to light this up in a different way than other people are doing. So, but just changing the architecture, leading the way, and I think Andy has completely nailed the point here, is changing the way that you play the game is what creates that advantage for those operators. And I think Seaborn is a perfect example of that.
Ricardo, so tell us, where do you see the strategic advantages? Where do you see the strategic opportunities from the demand which we're facing today and tomorrow? So a bit of a crystal ball question, but here you go. It's all to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I agree that more capacity, right? That's the demand. So more capacity at a lower cost per bit. I mean, that's pretty much a given. That's every discussion. Okay, can you give me more for less? And we're doing that, right? So reducing the cost per bit, that's what we do, right? That's what we are achieving. But you put on top of that, right, the current situation that we're facing today. I mean, not today recently, but it's been, what, 2 years now? Pandemic, so comes in the pandemic. So with all that, what we see is that more and more we'll have the need for flexibility, scalability, and automation, right? So two things that Andy mentioned that we fully agree. You need to be flexible, you need to be scalable, otherwise you just don't survive. But to accomplish that, you need more and more automation. We'll talk about that. So if you look at today's networks, they're getting more complex. Because for you to provide flexibility, you need to add a little bit of complexity. And then you try to remove the complexity by automation. So an example, so today you have networks that used to be closed, meaning the same vendor of the wet plant was the vendor of the terminals. Now you have networks that are open. So you have a subsea cable, the wet plant, and then you have a different vendor for the terminals. You can have on the same cable multiple vendors, right? Many customers of ours, they have a dual vendor strategy. They have Infinera in one fiber pair, they have CN in the other. So same cable. So the cables are now open. You can even have different vendors on the same fiber pair via spectrum sharing, via some other mechanisms. So this adds complexity. On top of that, you have now SDM, which is a fancy way of saying more fiber pairs. So we were moving from traditionally 4 fiber pairs to standard cable became 8. 8 was considered a high fiber count now. Now we're looking at 12 as kind of a minimum, only 12, and 16 and 24. So 16 are being delivered, 12 is already live, 16 is being delivered, 24 is being contracted right now. So more fiber pairs. On top of that, we have, because of COVID, we have less people, right? The great, what do you call it? The great, not retirement, the great people moving away. There's a name for that, which is weird, right? And then you have access restrictions, so complexity. So how do you go and try to solve that? So the good thing is that the network itself can help you with that, because if you look at the network, especially the modems, they can be used as sensors for the network. They can stream live real-time telemetry, right? And they can provide you a lot of information from the network. So if you take that and then you analyze that with intelligent, data-driven automation, you can use that conclusion, that information to act on your network, because again, that same network is very programmable, right? So you take the information, you're sensing the network, you're analyzing what's going on, and you make decisions based on your policies, and you act on the network. So, well, in Siena, we called it adaptive network. And as an example of how that can be beneficial, let's take a cable that is being, subsea cable being deployed, you need to go and accept. It's an open cable. It's about to be delivered by your wet plant vendor, and you need to make sure that he's delivering the cable according to what you specify. The capacity, the OSNR, all the parameters that you have. So imagine if you could do, and spoiler alert, you can do that, you could go and sweep the whole spectrum in a matter of hours and identify everything that happens on that fiber pair in terms of how much capacity, what powers you can adjust. And then because you're sensing that same fiber pair, you can tweak a lot of parameters on that fiber pair to not only have a faster conclusion if the system is matching your requirements, but you can also tweak many of those parameters to actually get more capacity out of the cable. So you have a faster time to revenue because you're taking hours instead of days to test that fiber pair. And imagine maybe you have 24 fiber pairs, right? Different vendors. So it could take weeks or months to go and do all that. But now we're doing this in a matter of just a few days. And at the end of that, you realize that you actually have more capacity than you previously considered, because during this process, you tweak all those parameters to maximize capacity. So again, adding more value to your assets, because once your subsea system is underwater, it's there. So if you can squeeze more capacity, that's a benefit for you. So increasing your return over investment. So we're seeing all that. We did a trial, a couple trials, one with Facebook and some others this year, 2021. And we think we're going to double down on that next year, because with many cables coming live, we see it as a great benefit to get more capacity and get those systems ready to carry traffic. And then you can go and sell that capacity to your customers. So that's what we're trying to do, enable you to succeed in the marketplace. Yeah.
And make a buck out of it, right? Oh yeah, that's good. So Andy, just quickly going back to you. Talking about all the advantages, the sustainability. I mean, the demand is there, whatever. But I mean, just tipping a little bit on the investment, and how do you judge the success of your investment? Because the investment is also huge. So how do you judge the success?
I think you look at it in terms of, upfront on the initial investment, there is a very detailed plan that's obviously supports that. It's, as you said, it's a significant capital investment. Seabrass One, take the subsea cable system, all the domestic networks we built to either end, total just under $500 million to build the entire network out, subsea and domestic. That's not insignificant, and it's not a short-term plan either, by the way. That's a long-term infrastructure play. I think that's where we've seen a lot of the market change over the last few years, is a move away from traditional, is it a good telecom investment, to is it a good infrastructure investment? And also think about it in terms of not just a cable, but what does it enable for the business in terms of overall products and services we can offer beyond just pure subsea capacity? So, for example, we look at Seabrass One. The cable itself is a very, very much a long-term infrastructure play. It's a 10+ year view in terms of the cable itself, and then piece parts that sit on top of that: capacity services, IP network, value add services we deliver across it. We look at those on a much shorter term basis. So I mentioned earlier the rolling out the Spectrum platform across Seabrass One. We'd normally look at that in terms of a 3 to 5 year view. What's it do for us in 3 to 5 years? Yes, we get payback. In that particular architecture, we get payback on the capital within 12 months. But what's it do for us over the 3 to 5 year view in terms of reducing our capital forecast for the growth that we envisage? And that's how we measure success. And then, going back periodically and saying, okay, so a year ago we said we would get down, to X dollars per gig delivered as a capital number. How have we done? Have we got there? Are we making it? Are we still missing a piece, or are we actually overachieving and doing better than we thought? But I think there's several lanes to this highway. There's the main highway, which is a very much a long-term infrastructure play, and then there's the lanes you layer on top of that are service-driven, much shorter focus in terms of what's the view on return, and much more focused in terms of where's all the data that supports whether I'm meeting that particular business unit's objectives. So, and we've got 3 today. We've got pure capacity. We've now got spectral capacity, and we've got our IP network. And we manage those as very discrete buckets in terms of overall performance. And then we've got the long-term infrastructure sitting underneath it that acts like the bridge. But that's kind of the view we take. It's a little bit different to traditional, but it seems to make more sense to us.
Eric, if I may add to that,
please, Andres.
he mentioned something that's pretty interesting, which is the time to market.
Mm-hmm.
Their investments and the way they capitalize on investment depends on how quickly can they react to a changing environment, which for us right now, it is pretty quickly. I mean, we see what COVID did to us. It actually, at least in Latin America, it actually showed how we were not considering what 3 or 5 years would look like. It kind of showed us the way to say, well, are we really planning correctly our investment? And I think Andy mentions a great point here, because their way of planning for that return of investment has significantly changed. And for us, I mean, time to market, we see at everything. I mean, we can talk a lot of technical details here, but I think from a success metric, go in and ask to any of these operators who use latest technology, how fast can they turn up bandwidth between a capital city and a different continent, and you'll see what time to market really looks like in 2021, 2022, and that's a very, very good metric for success.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool, thank you. Now, Don, on the ISP layer, how to meet the ISP current and future capacity and connectivity demands? I mean, I really want to hear this from let's say, one of the specialists here, from your angle.
Yeah, certainly. I touched on earlier just the growth, and in particular, kind of starting with our peering connections, which I think you all appreciate is kind of that network to network at the tier 1 status. That's kind of one area of focus where the bandwidth, the link size, if you will, is naturally increasing, and rather than stacking up multiple 100 Gs, there's a real push on now to go to 400. That's one big driver. The second is for the reasons we mentioned, the traditional outside the normal peering points, which I think many are familiar with. We're also seeing just kind of customer, or as we call it, high speed or IP transit. So not a peer, but increasingly now we're seeing customer links, certainly in the multiples of 100 gig. And as I said, they're occurring, those connectivity needs are occurring outside the normal main cities throughout the world. So again, it's an interesting driver for us, because I liken it to the fact that the backbone in the internet is continuing to flatten, just in Andy's example of just flattening that piece between the landing station and the key pops in a nearby metro or region. We're seeing it happen all over the place. So from that standpoint, for us, it's more capacity, link size, it's more connections, whether it's more cables that are naturally coming in. And again, great examples of things like Virginia Beach, where the non-usual locations are becoming more and more relevant. So those are the things we're thinking about beyond just traditional growing internet traffic, and we're thinking more and more about where these points of concentration are starting to pop up that we wouldn't have expected over time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Eduardo. I mean, do you see the same growth? And from your perspective, what are the different partnership models between the ISPs and the capacity providers, if any?
Yes, of course, we see the same growth in terms of capacity demands and the requirements, because it's not only capacity, it's flexibility, as it was said earlier, it's resiliency, it's diversity, and it's latency as well. That's the game changer in the last couple of years, because all the new applications, as I mentioned before, especially the gaming and also the cloud to some extent, require low latency. In terms of partnership, of course, I think the partnership is the way to go, not because it is cool, but because we need partnership among the players in this industry. If you look at the industry, if you look at the model in which we are doing business, we take a different approach. We look at ourselves and we ask the question, what business are we in? Is it transport? Is it connectivity? We took a broader look at our business, and we think we are in the interconnectivity and interconnection business. So we go a little bit beyond our landing stations or our POPs, not to provide just end-to-end capacity to satisfy the demands of the OTTs mainly, or not that much of the user, but the OTTs, which are the drivers of the demand today. But we looked at the needs from the ISPs, which at the same time, they congregate the demand of their end users. By end users, I understand not only the residential users that accesses video streaming or the web, but also the enterprise that require access to the cloud. So those are the basic needs on the user side. On the OTT side, it's, again, deliver their products with the quality of experience. So what is needed absolutely is the ability to interconnect those content with those users with the lowest latency possible. And of course, at the lowest cost, as we mentioned before. That's one of the drivers as well to squeeze our minds to see how can we lower the cost per megabit. It's not only on the transport network, it's also on the delivery of that content. So we don't measure anymore by capacity, we measure what do we deliver to our customers. And in this sense, partnership with both ISPs and OTTs is crucial because the model that we built is this interconnection, what we call an ecosystem, in which you can exchange content and demand for that content between users and content providers in a facility in which you can have them all the video streaming, all the gaming applications, all the web browsing, all the cloud as well, because they go with the same business model. And this ecosystem requires the contribution of both the content providers and the ISPs. So partnership is crucial. These ecosystem facilities, we have a few of them running already, are the ones that are going to drive our costs down, because to the price per meg on the transport, there's so much you can do, but we get to the point in which you're not going to be able to lower that cost anymore. I let our friends, vendors talk about that, but there are many other ways in which you can lower your cost in terms of delivering content. And that's the way we're going, expanding the concept of delivery of capacity to the delivery of content.
Okay, Ricardo, you want to?
If I may, if I could comment as well. I mean, one area that we're
come on, move.
One area that we're exploring, Andy touched on it too, just the constant year-over-year price compression, and I know it's very familiar to use things like IRUs in the dark fiber and days, but just trying to rekindle that same concept that was used many years ago, where wavelengths were purchased on long-term IRUs. So kind of help break that tyranny of constant 10 to 15% compression year over year. Commit to a capacity provider on a longer term, and get the idea of stability from our standpoint, but at the same time enjoy favorable economics over that same term. So those are some areas we're exploring, not strictly on the submarine cable, but equally on the terrestrial side. But again, it just kind of helps think of it as a partnership, because we, as outlined, the significant capital outlay to ensure that the capacity and the relevant bandwidth is available. We respect the fact that it has to happen, but how is it that we could help and at the same time enjoy good economics looking ahead? So that's some of the areas we're starting to explore.
Yeah, and just to address or comment on Eduardo's comment on cost reduction, right? So there are a few ways that we can accomplish that. So one of them is really the cost going down on each individual part or card, right? So that's a given. There's a cost reduction because we get scale and we can do all that. The second one is reducing the cost per bit. So as technology evolves, we have more capacity for the same or almost the same hardware, then you can reduce the cost per bit. And we see that greatly reducing year over year. So that helps a lot. And the third one, which is something close to what Andy commented, is the reduction due to different architecture that you can deploy. So something that we did with GlobeNet, for example, right, Eduardo, is what we call Geomesh, which is basically bypassing the cable landing stations, right, and going directly to the POP, to the data center. So if you look at the Malbec cable, so we have connectivity from São Paulo, going through Praia Grande, going through the Subsea cable, going to Las Toninas, and then bypassing all the way to Pacheco. There's one transponder on one modem in Pacheco, one in São Paulo. Everything else is optical. So, and we see the impact this can bring, and this is very close to what Andy mentioned that you're doing, because with discussions with some of the customers on the same cable, the customers come, how my competitor can provide a cost that is so much lower than mine? Yeah, because he's bypassing like 3 sides. You're doing region every side, so you have to buy a lot of cards. I'm happy to say with the cards, but you're not going to be competitive. So why don't you go and change that? So, and sometimes they struggle to see the benefit, but I agree with Andy that people will more and more start to do that because it makes a lot of sense. It's going to be lower latency and better cost, less points of failure. So lots of benefits there. So 3 ways to reduce costs: individual cost per bit, and intelligent architecture. So we're trying, Eduardo. We're doing our best. So we're going to get there.
No, we know. And that goes along with what I was saying before in delivering content, because in the past years, or at the beginning, let's say 15, 20 years ago, the point was delivering capacity at the landing station, right? Then we extended that to the POP, as Andy was mentioning. But today, no one wants capacity at the landing station, right? So we have to go through that, benefiting from the technology that is there. So go straight to the POP. We took it a little bit further to go to the edge, because if the content is the main transport that we're providing, we're not going to stop at the POP, because then you have another piece of equipment to go from the POP to the data center location. So we went straight into the edge, or we build our edge as well. That's a way also to reduce the cost per meg, which is basically the reason that are going to, the fact that it's going to make us sustainable in the long term. We're talking about how you measure your success. And today is about profitability and return on investment. So that's not going to happen unless we both collaborate on the vendor side and also on the partnership with other players, being ISPs or OTTs.
Andres?
Well, I can definitely say that they are pushing on the vendor side to reduce a lot on our hardware.
So they're doing a good job.
Oh, they're doing an excellent job. I can assure you of that. But to be honest with the equation here, we have been talking about vertical integration for quite some time. And the fact that you have 4 components or 5 components, independent components working in a single hardware, being reduced into a chip, it provides a very good reliability, but also price reduction. We also have to start thinking about how green this solution is. You know, when we talk to content providers, they are interested in power. That's it, because for them, bandwidth is just like paying electricity, is their internal consumption. When we talk to operators, it's a whole different conversation, because for them, it is a product that they're going to resell at the end. But also, it has become part of their profitability, just as Eduardo was mentioning. And to Ricardo's point here, we have seen, you know, Latin America, the content providers are driving immense amount of bandwidth everywhere. But sometimes it's not about, you know, you need 800 gigs right away. It's about how many regeneration points can we express. And I have asked the question, or we have a customer in Latin America. So I asked them, where is your landing station? Is this right in the middle of the desert? It's no longer about where your cable physically will end, but it will be where that service starts. And I think that creates a whole different equation from an economic return from that perspective.
No, thank you. So, Andy, how do submarine cables operators design their business plan to meet the ISP's current and future demands? I mean, you tipped on this already, but maybe a bit more general, not only ISPs, but how you do your planning?
I think you got to look at what are they trying to achieve? What are your different customer types trying to achieve? And if you take, you know, ISPs is a really good example. And Eduardo touched on it there. ISPs are not just interested in receiving services at the POP anymore. They want to receive services as close to the end user as they can get, so that the delivery of content for them is efficient and effective too. It's at the end of the day, to stimulate growth, which we all want to do. We all want to stimulate growth, because when we stimulate growth, people buy more services. To stimulate growth, you got to deliver not only a quality product end to end, So, content to client, but you've also got to deliver that in an efficient and sustainable way for all the parties involved. And that's, again, I agree with what Eduardo said. That means a lot more cooperation between not just different operators, but different owners, different end constituents, and the folks that the two guys sitting there that help us by making all the boxes and the architectures and technology that enable us to do that. But for ISP specifically, you have to look at what are they trying to achieve and how do they evolve over time. So I'll give you an example. In Brazil, as an example, you go back even just 5 years. Most Brazilian ISPs, all they wanted was IP transit. That's all they wanted. They just wanted straight connectivity to the internet. And then they started to realize that, well, actually, most of this traffic now can stay inside Brazil. So then they wanted connectivity into the local IXs so they can connect to one another. And then they realized, quite recently, a lot of them now are now of the mindset that, well, if I can connect to an IX in Brazil and get, 70-75% of my traffic, why can't I connect to an IX in New York and one in Frankfurt and one in Singapore and basically really tailor the services and the content that I bring to my end users? And that's where, as an international service provider, we can help. We can help there. We can definitely help tailor that solution and help enable them to be more efficient and differentiate themselves from their competition, because that will stimulate growth.
Okay, cool. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are coming sort of to the end of the session already. I mean, we're pumping through for 1 hour. So, but would really be interesting to give the panelists all, let's say, a quick minute to see how they see, let's say, the future. I know it's not the crystal ball. It's very difficult. I understand this. But what do you think? What's out there? What's there to expect? And what do we see coming, or should we expect to see coming? Don, maybe you first. You want to start off?
Touched on earlier, I just see future continued reliance on the internet as a acceptable means of transport, I should say, for global enterprise connectivity, and and with that comes a whole series of adjunct capabilities, security first and foremost, and then equally continued performance improvements, whether it's naturally latency, but then also maybe even a specialized traffic regime. So it's only going to get more important and more intense.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo.
Yeah, 100% agree with Don. It's going to get worse, let's say. For us, it's going to be more challenging because the demand is going to grow. The request for quality of experience, availability, resiliency, latency, that's going to go up always, pricing from the OTTs and from the end user. So again, we are squeezed, as I said before. But the key is going to be how to be ahead of the curve, how to adapt to this new situation. And as long as we are able to do that, we're going to be successful as an industry.
Okay, thank you, Eduardo. Ricardo?
Yeah, one thing that I think we should think about, and I think everybody touched upon on that, is edge cloud, right? So if you look at the evolution of the network today, we moved from noise to data to content, mostly video. We already did the connecting to the data center instead of the POP. We're already doing the bypassing of the landing station for a while. It seems that brings a lot of benefit. But if you look at the impact the edge cloud is going to bring to the network, I mean, you're just thinking about 3 to 5 times more data centers in the edge than you have today in the core, right? And why you need all that? Because quality of experience is being, every time you're doing your football TV, you're doing something, you want to have that better quality of experience, right? You're watching Netflix, whatever you're doing, you want to have that better. So what this is causing is pushing the content closer and closer to the end users, both humans and machines, right? And these users, they're not living just around data center, they're at the edge, they're spread around. So one thing that we'll start to realize is that we may have to rethink the way we did things up until now. Just an example, we talked about how we save a lot of space and power by moving all the modems to the data center and freeing up space and power in the CLS, right, the cable landing station. So maybe we'll start to think about taking that space and power that you freed up and use for storage and compute, and turning that CLS into an edge data center, which is closer to the users there. So the takeaway there is that we'll have to look at the network yet again and think about how we support all of that change, because it's going to be massive when we start to try to support edge cloud, especially distributed edge cloud, with that number of data centers that are going to come. They have to be all interconnected. They have to be operated at low latency and providing the best services to the end user. So it's going to be a big change. So yeah, keep an eye out for that.
Thank you so much, Andres.
Well, adapt or die. I think that's going to be my prediction, because at the rhythm that these guys are competing, it is very fierce. It's a very fierce competition, and they keep coming up with awesome ideas about how they can re-architect their network and how can they optimize, and they put us into the test, and then they come back with their ideas. They said, dude, this is what I need you to build 3 years from now. You know, you have to be in your mind already planning for the next great optical engine and what it's going to be, you know, what their demands are going to be 3 years from now. But I think that rhythm of innovation has definitely accelerated because of the pandemic, because of the content providers and the push of a global optical mesh. You know, it is one thing that I'm grateful about in being in my industry and where we are, is that the only thing that these guys are not going to virtualize eventually is a photon, which eventually we will continue to sell and manufacture equipment for. But definitely adaptability for those operators out there. My message is you need to start rethinking, how do you move a bit from one side of the network to the next one? Stop thinking about boundaries. It's not you operate in this country, you operate on a global network. And that's how I see it.
Okay, thank you. Andy, some famous last words. How's your crystal ball? How does it look?
I think, you know, the group touched earlier on how subsea, you know, at a subsea level, cables are getting bigger. And they're the big, you know, major highways that people are always thinking about in terms of transatlantic, trans-Pacific, up and down the east-west coast of Latin America. Something to watch out for that I would point towards would be, there's going to be a lot more regional connectivity. Edge only works if we can get the big pipes to the within the regions. It's no good just connecting one region to the next. It's got to be interregional. So there's going to be a lot more regional connectivity. That's a focus for us, especially. And the other thing I'd say is, absolutely have conversations with you know, your equipment and your vendor partners, like the guy sitting there, about price per bit, but push them. The real way to push them, and it was just mentioned, real way to push them is on what you want your network to do and look like. That's where the partnership comes. It's not on reducing price per bit. It's on how do you make your network function better for what you need it to do. That's where you get, you know, sustainability, reductions in cost, but more importantly, adaptability and future capabilities. So it's as much a partnership as it is a, you know, vendor customer relationship. That's how we always vision it.
Thank you, Andy. Let's quickly see if there are any questions from the audience live here with us at the GCCM in Miami. No, they're all happy faces. Are you having happy faces or what? Right? Okay, that's good. All clear?
It must be lunchtime.
It must be lunchtime, Andy. Thank you for bridging this. And for me, Andy, and then from Seaborn, of course, thank you very much also for sponsoring this session.
Our pleasure. Our pleasure.
Having you. Don from GTT, thank you so much. And
pleasure.
Eduardo, GlobeNet, cool having you. Thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
Thank you. And live, Andres and Ricardo, and of course the audience. And so thank you very much. Yes, it's lunchtime. And let's not forget, because we were talking about green, about power and data centers and green financing. Quickly, we're tipping on that. We're going to talk about this here live at the GCCM Miami at 2 o'clock Eastern time. So be there, be square. Ciao for now from here, guys. And we go for lunch. Ciao.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ciao. Thank you so much. Thank you, guys.